this week on the BackTable podcast.
I would just say, like, I have no idea, how we built our practice. Like, when I look back on it, because where we started to where we are today is just totally different. I think you should really just throw yourself out there and try things. As far as, all these weird injections and stuff like that, like, that's the easy stuff if you're an IR. Never feel like you can't do that stuff. Everyone can do that, And then all the things to get you to the point where you have a practice, like, you can figure it out. That's the stuff we don't know how to do when we come out of training, but you'll figure it out just like everybody else did.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BackTable MSK podcast, your source for all things musculoskeletal. You can find all previous episodes of our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on backtable.com.
This is your guest host, Shamit Desai. As a reminder from prior episodes, I'm an interventional radiologist in Chicagoland. I'm excited to introduce our special guest today, Keerthi Prasad. Welcome, man.
Thanks, Shamit. Appreciate it.
So, Keerthi's the co-founder and director of interventional radiology at the Centers for Pain Control and Vein Care in Northwest Indiana. It's a unique practice that I've actually referred to myself, and I've had a lot of great chats with Keerthi over time. It's great seeing you in person on Zoom, man.
Yeah, good to see you, Shamit.
So can you tell the audience a little bit about your background? Where are you from? Where did you train?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Chicago, kind of not far from where you're at today. I did med school and residency at the University of Illinois in Chicago. And then I went to IU for my interventional radiology fellowship. And that was back in 2015.
Yeah, feels like a while, huh? And what was your training focus on? You were at some major institutions here in Chicago and at IU, very well-known research studies coming out of those institutions. What was kind of the focus during your residency and fellowship?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was in med school at UIC, I actually met Ron Gaba. He was a new attending at that time, and he had a huge impact on me. He's one of these guys who's like constantly improving. And UIC was a big liver and transplant center at that time. So there's a lot of TACE, Y90, and then, Ron was just like a tips machine. And then when I went to IU, it was actually like way more broad. It was just a really, really busy place, kind of covered everything except stroke, a lot of transplant, liver, Y90, that stuff, but tons of trauma. And then I also did a bunch of, peripheral vascular procedures, including, and then we even did some aortas. That was kind of falling off at the time, but got our hands on some of them. It was good. Yeah.
Really cool. So we'll obviously get into a lot of your practice makeup right now, but I can pretty much suffice it to say that you're not doing a lot of TIPS and Y90 and trauma embolizations in your outpatient centers. Is that right?
No, that's right. You don't want me doing your TIPS.
So you have these really unique centers in Northwest Indiana, and that's really what we want to get into here. So what can you tell us a little about your practice setup? What does your practice offer?
Yeah, so, we're an independent private practice in Northwest Indiana, about an hour outside Chicago, a very large pain management practice. We have a bunch of interventional pain docs as well as 2 interventional radiologists. And then we also have a large vein practice, actually one of the largest vein practices in Indiana. And then we do some CLI and some UFEs as well. That's kind of more of a boutique part of our practice, but the large volume of what we do is veins and pain.
So veins and pain, has a nice ring to it. What does your practice look like? Are you working out of hospitals? Are you exclusively outpatient? What's your setup?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We have 4 ambulatory surgical centers. We also have a large OBL, kind of 2 OBLs. 2 of the centers function as an ASC/OBL. We don't do much at hospitals at all. Some of my pain partners, they'll go there for consults every now and then, but it's pretty rare. We're really just outpatient. Our vein program in particular, I think, is kind of a large strength of ours. That's got to be outpatient in my mind. If you're going to build a big superficial venous practice, it's got to be really focused, and that's how we've approached that. We get patients from all over. 6 to 8 hours away is pretty normal for some of our wound referrals. It's been really great.
Super cool. That sounds like a really unique practice, man. Very atypical for IR. Particularly, some of the things I want to get into is the partnership with your pain partners. I'm assuming they're anesthesia pain or PM&R or independently trained?
Yeah, they're all anesthesiologists.
All anesthesiologists.
Sorry, they're all anesthesiologists, yeah.
Okay. So, You talked about your partners going to the hospital at times. So are you going to the hospital at all, or do you maintain privileges? How does that work in the state of Indiana?
Yeah, so in Indiana, to work in an OBL, you don't need hospital privileges. To work in an ASC, you do. The law is kind of vague, but really you need privileges within the same or an adjacent county in Indiana, which is a very large area in Indiana. But we maintain privileges at a couple places. Honestly, it's nothing we've been able to really grow. We don't focus a lot on it. I don't think the hospital's really focused on it, but we've been lucky enough to keep that going. I will say it's a challenge. It's a good question, a good point to bring up. In most states, I think that's kind of your rate limiting step is, getting the hospitals to agree to let you do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Understood. So what are the biggest strengths of your practice in your mind, Keerthi? It's an interesting practice. It's different from most. I'm sure there are unique challenges, unique strengths, and difficulties, both with working with a different specialty altogether in a multi-specialty group, and also, being an owner as well as an operator.
Yeah. So a couple of questions there. I think, joining a pain management practice was kind of unique for me. Pain docs, they rely heavily on volume. So it was really interesting to see how they structured a practice, how they ran their clinic, how their back end functioned. They do a ton of procedures, but they have, they're not high revenue generators, right? So you need to be really efficient with how you manage that. I was able to learn a lot from them. And at the same time, when you work with people who've built a practice before, they may not really know what you're talking about, what you're doing, but they're going to give you guidance on how to do it and how to get it done. When we were starting out, I was totally afraid to hire one additional employee, because I'm like, oh, we might be bankrupt next week.
Yeah, totally.
My partners are like, just do it, it'll be fine, and it was fine, and it's kind of interesting working with guys who really know outpatient medicine, because they really know how to market themselves, how to treat the patients, how to treat the referring docs. That's all stuff that I think we all intuitively know. But when you actually see people put into practice, it makes a big difference and kind of leaves an impact on you. The other interesting thing too is, a lot of people ask me why pain management. And I tell you this, if you want to do peripheral vascular disease, we're competing with a lot of people. You need to go where the patients are. And we realized early on that pain management and chronic pain population, they're the same people who have peripheral vascular disease, right? They've been working hard their whole lives. They're on their feet. Things are wearing out. And then, there's just a lot of synergy there. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, you're telling me that patients don't know exactly what interventional radiology is as a specialty? It's the first time I've heard of that.
Yeah, patients and docs, a lot of docs too. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you're saying that pain, veins, and PAD are often concomitant. Are you finding that has made up the majority of your practice, so you don't have time for some of the other referrals? Are you getting referrals for other procedures? I'm sure there's a bit of spine work in there that both pain and IR could do as well.
Yeah. So it's not just veins and arteries that I do all day, right? My partners send me a ton of interesting pain cases. Over time, I've kind of taken over most of the vertebral augmentation. We do some interesting newer procedures, Vertiflex, DRG stimulators, and then a lot of less common stuff, just weird ultrasound guided blocks. One of my partners used to work at HSS, and he'll send me an article or something, say, hey, can you do this? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. Yeah. I've got an ultrasound and a few needles,
Yeah, sure.
And actually those procedures are a lot of fun, I don't think you could build a practice on that. It's just too infrequent, and the revenue is really not there, right? But you're treating neuralgia paresthetica, you block some iliohypogastric, some median nerves, you even do some Botox for bruxism and stuff like that, just a lot of random stuff, but it's really satisfying. These patients have been bounced around forever. And honestly, in 30 seconds, you're relieving them something that's been, ruining their lives in a lot of cases. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I've done a lot of the other bread and butter spine injections over time, just filling in for these guys, but they're a lot faster than I am at it.
Yeah,
these guys will do 40 spine injections in a day. I can't keep up.
Yeah. And were you doing these in fellowship or residency at all, or did you learn this all through their mentorship?
Yeah, I think maybe I'd done a couple epidurals in fellowship, but that was about it. They just have so much volume. It's a quick learning experience. As radiologists, I think we have a certain approach, which is quite a bit different than how maybe other specialties do things. We're heavily focused on proper imaging techniques, and knowing exactly where we are. Maybe that slows us down a little bit, but I think it lets us do certain things that maybe other people can't do, or they haven't spent the time to build that part of their skill set. So that's been like something that I've been able to bring to the practice too. More challenging things, they'll ask me to do them, and I can take some time and knock it out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had a recent episode that came out where I was the guest, and I talked about building an IR skill set. And I find it's the exact same thing. You read a couple things and you rely on your catheter, wire, and needle placement skills on fluoroscopy, and an IR can pretty much get a needle, a wire, or a catheter anywhere in the body. I totally agree with you. But I'm sure it's nice to have these people to lean on, particularly in a dedicated center. I mean, if you were in a hospital and just getting one-offs, would you still have the same passion?
No, not at all. When you run your own practice, and honestly, actually all the guys I work with, they're all real close friends of mine, a couple of my best friends, right? We put all of our effort into this, right? Like, this is what you spend all your time thinking about and how to make it better. It's just a lot different, right? We control the whole process for the patient. We take on a lot of responsibility as a result, but we really like doing it. And I do too, I don't think if I was in a hospital, I would respond like if someone called me up and they're like, hey, can you do this random Botox thing you've never done before? I'd probably just say, hey, I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I can certainly vouch for that, having sent you, several referrals for patients who either couldn't get into my clinics or like just, their insurance wasn't accepted by the hospitals that I worked at. They've all, not to build your ego up too much, but, they all have said that the process at your centers, it felt like a luxury spa versus being in a hospital, which can totally be a nightmare for patients. So personally, I can vouch for that for your practice. How long do you think it took, and who are the players involved in creating that infrastructure?
Yeah, that's really important to think about, and I appreciate the feedback too. All of our procedures require so much coordination, right? It's just like from the receptionist to your billing team, to your medical assistants, and we hire all these people, right? We have surgical and X-ray techs. We have ultrasound techs. We have NPs. You need to work out the details at every single step. If you're focused on, just a couple procedures and a couple disease processes, over time, you work out all the kinks, right? Like, you've already seen every single hiccup at every single stage. And everybody on your team understands why that's really important. So everyone's always getting better.
Yeah,
and
totally.
The way we do it is we want them to make it better, right? So my ultrasound techs, I don't need them to do procedures with me, but for the first few years that we have them employed, they're doing cases with me, so every week they're seeing me do, at least 30 or 40 venous interventions, right? So they go back, and when they're scanning people, when they're troubleshooting, they know exactly how I'm going to approach something. They know how I'm going to fix something, right? We work very closely together. And thinking globally, like from a competitive standpoint, once you've established that, it's really hard for other people to compete with you, right? Like, how do you develop that quality? How do you bring that to the patients? You can go back to your referring docs and say, hey, this is how it went with this complex patient you sent me, or this guy had been worked on before. We cleaned it all up. This is kind of what was going on. And people start to pick up on that. And at the same time, a lot of venous interventions are pretty low revenue, right? Like, some of them, they're not paying what a kypho pays or arterial intervention pays.
Absolutely.
But you can work it into your workflow and you can make it work, right? And so all of a sudden, maybe a procedure that economically isn't desirable, but the patient really needs, you can make it work for you, right? Because it's easy for you to do,
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if they think of you as their doctor, if they can identify you as their vascular specialist, only good things will come. That's such a great point for people all throughout their career, especially trainees. So you talked a bit about really training up these the sonographers, other essential players within your practice. People without which the practice really doesn't run. What we've found in the hospital setting is, given the current climate in healthcare just broadly, and particularly in the interventional space and in radiology in general, is that people are leaving. People who are very trained up and very, very good at what they do, they're getting offers for double, triple, quadruple the pay. They're traveling. How have you dealt with retention? Has that at all been an issue for your practice? And how have you just dealt with keeping people, wanting them to stay?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. We invest a lot in all of our people, right? Some people leave, there's just normal attrition, right, associated with the business. I think we've seen some of the things you're describing. We have about 120 employees across the company. So, we've lost a bunch of billing people who are getting crazy offers. We lost a bunch of nurses. As far as the core team, we haven't seen that as much. And I think it has a lot to do with, people appreciating that you've invested a lot in them, right? Personally, I think they're not really indebted to, but they want to stick around, right? They like the mission. They like what they're doing. They know what it's like at other places. So someone has to really, really make a compelling offer, I think. Mm-hmm. But with that said, I've lost well-trained ultrasound techs in the past to, some of the chain vein clinics, the national chains. They paid, like you said, almost twice what we're paying. And I don't blame those people for leaving either, right?
Yeah. Gotta feed the kids.
Yeah, exactly. But we try to give people a lot of autonomy, no BS at work, right? Minimize the politics. I don't have a lot of paperwork they have to do, all that kind of stuff. But it's a big problem. I think maybe at the hospital, you're maybe more vulnerable, right? Because there's guys like me looking to hire people like that sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a step back for just a second. So you said there are 6 physicians in your practice, yeah?
Yeah.
And how many are IR?
There's two IRs.
Two IR. So you and an IR partner essentially running the IR show. Did you come in at the same time?
No, I actually came in straight out of fellowship.
Okay.
There's really not much of a vein business at that time, but we built it up over time. And then about a year and a half after that, my partner Monish came to join me. And then a few years after that, we hired an MP, and it just kind of kept growing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the pain practice was already, I'm taking it, the pain practice was already established then?
Yeah. So when I joined, there were about 1.5 locations for the pain practice.
Okay.
So it was my senior partner who started the practice, and then another part-time location. And then we did not have an ASC at that time, if I recall. And then we kind of built that over time. So once I joined, we kind of built a couple other clinics and started adding ASCs, and then eventually the OBL. Yeah. And honestly, the OBL was kind of a natural thing. We just started with veins originally, but you start getting referrals for arterial work. And then you realize your partners have C-arms just sitting there. So you're like, hey, I can use that.
Yes. And why did you go with ASC versus an all OBL model?
Yeah. So the ASC has certain advantages. One of them is actually, especially on the pain management side, the revenue is superior. So the reimbursement is just favorable in that environment. And then we also had the intent originally to bring in, other types of docs. I think we've had some guys doing some kind of spine surgery, and, some ortho guys come in from time to time. That part of the business never really took off. And I think we haven't really spent a lot of time growing it, but we wanted that flexibility.
Interesting. Yeah. To get back to a point you made a little bit ago, you came out straight out of fellowship and you came out solo. This is really for the residents in early careers. How did you, how was it going into an OBL ASC setting without an established mentor in that practice? You were learning new techniques, and you really were thrown into becoming a business owner as well as a practicing physician for the first time. How did that suit you? How long till you got your feet under you?
Yeah, that was scary. It's funny. This is like 2016, I guess, and OBLs were kind of a thing then, but they're slowly taking off. I didn't know anyone with an OBL, or I knew one person.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I joined OEIS at that time. I got some good information. One of the things I realized though is, for me personally, I wanted to build something in the outpatient setting, and I saw the value of something really focused, right? Because I was kind of in the opposite environment, in fellowship, and I thought, wow, there's so much we can do here, but it's really not being done to its fullest potential, right? And you're really leaving the market open for other people to just come in and do it. And in a lot of cases, these are lesser trained physicians, right? And so I thought, why are we doing that? And so then I kind of got obsessed with that concept. So then I went to the pain guys who are friends of mine, and we talked a little bit about this, and they saw a lot of this stuff, and they said, "Hey, come do it." Like you said, though, they weren't IR mentors.
Right.
So getting out there, and honestly, I still remember the first vein ablation I did on my own. I was scared out of my mind, and I have no idea why, but I was. I triple checked everything. Yep. I think I called my friend, afterwards to make sure I did it right.
Yeah. It's like our DR colleagues, when they have to sign their first chest x-ray on their own as an attending, it's just like you sit there and stare at the sign button for 10 minutes before you actually click it. I totally feel you.
Yeah, exactly. It was fun. The other scary thing is, you're getting bills that you have to pay, and you don't have any income, right? So you spend all of your time just focused on that. And I remember talking to one of my old chairmen about it, actually. And he said, "Hey, weren't you scared?" And I said, "Well, I had nothing to lose, right? All I had was debt."
Yeah. That's so true.
It's just going to be more debt.
Yeah, for sure.
I just kept telling myself that.
That's hilarious. And now you're the owner of, a pretty much northern Indiana, broadly spanning wide territory, multi-specialty practice. What are the pros and cons of being an owner?
Yeah. The pros, I think, it's kind of the stuff everyone talks about, right? You have a lot of autonomy, a lot of independence. No one ever tells me what to do, right? Like, I never do anything I don't want to do. And I only really do the stuff that I feel is worthwhile. Monish and I want to spend 3 or 4 hours revascularizing something, we'll do it, right? No one's complaining about the list. No one's saying like, "Hey, why don't you stent this guy?" I just don't do stuff like that, right? Because I don't really care. And also, it's really nice to see the development in all the people who work for you, right? Like, you hire these people, you see the whole process improve. It's really satisfying, and you're really helping all these people develop their careers. But then, that's also some of the downside, right? That's like a lot of responsibility, a lot of, you got to keep paying people, like everything falls on you at the end of the day. Something gets messed up, you're the one calling the referring doc, you're the one calling the patient, which I don't mind doing, but it is a lot of responsibility. But you control your life too, right? You say, "I only want to work 4 days a week. I'm only going to work 4 days a week." It's really good. And that's how we do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. So it seems like you have a lot of, you wear a lot of hats by being an owner, essentially, and you're responsible for a lot of, your patients, obviously, but then all of your staff as well. How is this set up? Are you full equity owners of your practice, or are you part of a larger network?
No, so the clinics and the ASCs are entirely physician owned. So it's just me and my partners. We have different equity splits kind of based on when we came in and how much money we put in. That's something I also owe my partners. I didn't have a lot of money to bring to the table. They helped fund my practice, and they own some of it today, but it's good for them, right? And it was good for me. I couldn't have invested in that right? But they were willing to take a chance on it. And for them, it wasn't a huge expense, right? They already had the facilities and everything. They're just running a little bit of money that they thought would come through. But if you can find people like that, it's awesome. Yeah,
certainly. Parts of your practice that are outsourced or, part of managed service organization or anything like that, billing, revenue cycle, HR, any things like that, the EMR, are there any things like that are not being handled directly in-house?
We actually do everything in-house. Our billing is done kind of half by our billing team, half through Athena, which is our EMR provider. Athena's it's a mediocre EMR, but a really strong billing platform, so that's why we use that. The analytics are great. So you get a lot of good data if you use them. That's one of the reasons we like to do that. But, pre-auth, all that stuff, we keep it in-house. I think it's just too personalized. It's hard to do everything outside of the practice.
Oh, so even the pre-auth, that's interesting. Even the pre-auth.
Yeah. So we have a big team that does that. What you find is if you have your pre-auth people really looking at your medical necessity docs, they're looking at the Medicare LCDs, NCDs. They then know what to look for in your notes and to highlight that stuff. It just saves a lot of time.
Yeah.
If you outsource all that, it's just tough, I think,
Oh yeah. I mean, even working in a hospital, when it goes anywhere outside of IR, if it goes to central scheduling or, OR scheduling, I mean, we experience these nightmares every day in the hospital. So I certainly know what you're saying. It's nice to keep it with well-trained people in your own department or your own practice in your case. How about for your insurance contracts? Now, do you outsource that for someone to negotiate for you, or have you done that all in-house as well?
Yeah, that I would recommend hiring someone. They have the relationships to the local payers. They can guide you. They kind of know, they have the experience, right? Like they know what numbers to look for, what numbers to ask for. That was huge when we started our ASCs. In Indiana, Anthem is by far the biggest payer on the private side. So we really needed to, get a contract with them when we needed the ASCs to get going. And they don't make it easy, right? Like, they just don't pay for a long time, right? They play some games, but if you have like a consultant, I think in our case, our guy was a lawyer too, they can really help guide you, kind of ease your concerns. They tell you to ask for crazy numbers. Maybe you get some of them,
How'd you decide as you were expanding your practice, as you got too busy to just practice out of one center, how did you decide on your market research telling you where to build your next center? And how did you deal with your property acquisitions? Was it initially rent? Was it rent to buy? Or was it pure upfront acquisition?
Yeah, great questions. As far as expansion, we would maintain data on where our referrals are coming from.
Okay.
And so for the second and third clinics, that's actually what it was based on. We just kind of saw where these patients were driving from. And in Indiana, people drive, like they're willing to drive an hour here and there, an hour and a half. No one cares, right? But the closer you get to those people, the better, right? So that's kind of how we planned out, I think, numbers 2 and 3. After that, it's just kind of a leap of faith, right? You kind of see where areas are growing. Growing areas are always good, right? It's good to just get in, especially because there typically aren't established referral patterns in those communities.
Yes.
So if you go somewhere that's new, you can just kind of be the guy, right? As far as buying versus renting, in the beginning, we did buy our real estate, mostly because Indiana is just a really cheap place to buy real estate, like it's probably cheaper to buy in certain cases than rent. The later, our more recent facilities have been situations where we rent. But I will say that, even leasing space, an ASC build out's not cheap, right? It's a 7-figure build out. You're taking out loans to do that. You got to be a little careful. Having that financial flexibility though meant a lot to us. So that's kind of why we did that.
Did you ever go into places where you felt like there was an established presence in either vein care or PAD, the bulk of your IR practice?
Yeah. So, actually, when we first showed up in Northwest Indiana, there are a lot of people doing veins, right? I don't think a lot of them were focused on medical venous disease. I think there's some cosmetic clinics. And then, when you think about what it takes to do a vein clinic, you realize the barrier to entry is really low, right? So any cardiologist, any surgeon, any burned out pediatrician or whatever, has the opportunity to run like a vein clinic, and if they meet like a Medtronic rep, they might do it, and these guys are just doing it on the side. And it's interesting, like in some of these communities, everyone will tell you like, hey, Dr. So-and-so is the vein expert out here, right? But then when you go there, you're like, this isn't exactly where the standard should be, right? You're like, I think we could do it a little bit better. Actually, I recall when you were practicing in our area, you were one of the only guys doing real deep venous work, and I could do some in the office, but I was like, oh, finally, I don't have to send someone 2 hours away, right?
Yeah.
Because what's happening in the community isn't actually the standard of care. That's what you realize, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can play off of that, you can build a business. That's my take on that. You'll get people who call you up, they yell at you, right? They're threatened.
Yeah. And
that's happened to me, by the way. Like I have a guy I've actually still never met in person. He called me up just to yell at me when I was starting.
Yeah.
And I have no idea why. He was just threatened, I think.
Yeah, I've certainly had that experience as well.
Yeah. And, It's not good, but you deserve to be there if you're doing good work, right?
Certainly.
Yeah.
So I mean, how did you watch your business flourish? Because I'm assuming you were turning away a lot of patients that other people may have treated, sort of borderline cases they may have treated. You see, based on everything that you write on social media and from our prior conversations, you treat everything extremely clinically first and then think about doing a procedure. Seems like your business, as far as revenue generation, would grow slower than some of the other practices in Northwest Indiana. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the thing I tell you is if you're focused on vein disease, it's everywhere. There's so much work and it still remains undertreated, right? I think there's a portion of the population that's overtreated. And then there's another portion of the population that's just completely undertreated. And, in the beginning, literally every single day, I was driving around Indiana trying to meet someone for lunch or just like a 15-minute talk, right? Just like a doc. NPs are great, by the way, just anyone who'd listen, right? So you spend a lot of time with those people. When they finally send you a referral, it's going to be some train wreck, that 3 people have worked on, and the best thing you can do is just be honest, right? Like in some of those cases, there's nothing to do. There's nothing left. In some of those cases, you can actually fix it, right? Or you can find some midway point. I think in the beginning, I would stress out a lot about those, trying to get everything back to normal, right? But that's not realistic all the time, But like you said, if you're trying to just build revenue, you could do that, but I don't think you'll build a sustainable practice, right? Because people are going to see that you're over-treating. They're going to be like, why did you even touch this person's legs, right? Like the other docs will see that. If you take the other approach, I think over time, you'll build the right kind of referral base, especially with like wound care, right? That's like, if you can get in with wound care, you have like an unlimited amount of work, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I get wound patients from Michigan, Southern Indiana. I get a lot from Chicago, and I've never met the people sending me the work. Mm-hmm. It's really just word of mouth, right?
Yeah. And how much, so now you've been in this practice for about 5 years. How much has your role as a door-to-door, a salesman essentially been from the beginning changed to what it is now? And what is your role now more in the practice? Like how is your day-to-day in the practice now?
Yeah. So when I said I was meeting people for lunch and everything every day, I'm not good at it.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
I'm a terrible salesperson. I was just like, it'd be great if you could send me someone. I don't know. Yeah. So you got to play to your strengths, right? I don't like doing that kind of stuff. I don't do a ton of it. And I honestly, there's a lot of people who are better at it than I am, mm-hmm. right?
Sure.
I just try to, send the doc a text, give them a call when the work's done, that kind of thing. I think that works, but I try not to market a lot like that anymore because I just don't like doing it, Day to day, I spend a couple hours a day just looking over things or answering questions and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Honestly, the workflow is pretty streamlined today, and the systems in place allow me to just kind of keep an eye on what's going on. So I just kind of do that. And then I'll do cases usually 4 days a week.
Okay.
The 5th day, I don't do anything,
Nice.
And then, our practice runs from 8 to 5, but not there the whole time, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like a lot's changed over those years.
Yeah.
What would you say the lead time was between, being a little more involved in marketing and trying to grow the practice to being at a place where you felt like it was sustainable? And I'm sure that had to do a lot to do with when you were in the red and when you finally turned the corner and, got into the black.
Yeah. So, we started making money, I think month 8 or 9 in the practice. So it wasn't that long.
Oh, wow.
And when I say making money, that means I can pay myself a salary.
Right.
Yeah.
It's always nice.
So that wasn't that bad. Yeah. It's good, right? That wasn't too bad. I don't think that stress ever goes away though. It took about 3 or 4 years where I was thinking, okay, this is going to keep happening, right? Those first few years when someone sends you a patient, you're like, oh man, they're never going to send me anyone again. Like you're always worried about that, right?
Yeah.
But it just kind of becomes sustainable. And one of the things you'll notice too is you don't need everybody to send you work, right? Especially when you come into like a small community, it's really hard to break those referral patterns. And you realize, some of these guys are, these clinics, these people, they've all worked together for 20, 30 years. Just because you show up doesn't mean they're going to send you anybody, but you don't need everyone to, right? You meet a lot of people who are open-minded. There are a lot of new docs coming into the community, people like that. And I think that's really what our clinics like kind of thrived on. We've had like just a solid base of referring docs. And then whenever new people come in the market, they probably hear good things or we try to meet them.
Yeah, that's great advice. Do you have any other advice for trainees and early career physicians other than what we've already spoken about?
Yeah, a couple of things. Like I would say, figure out what you want to do and just try to do it. Don't worry too much about like all the little details. That you're going to encounter 50 to 100 different problems, right, in setting up your practice. They're all just things that you got to figure out and you'll work through. And with that said, a ton of IRs have already done it. I think you should just reach out to people, ask people questions. I've done that. I still do that today, right?
Yep.
And I've never had anyone who said, "Oh, I don't want to help you," right? Like everyone's interested in what you're doing, right? Yep. Everyone wants to see you succeed, I think, and everyone wants to be helpful. I've had docs from all over the country come and visit us, spend time with us. It's been really interesting for me personally. I've really enjoyed doing that. And people reach out to me all the time, like Twitter, however, I don't even know how some people find me, right? But like, they call me and, I'm happy to help, right? Like, and then, I mean, there's guys like you putting out content like this too. I'd listen to everything that everybody's ever said.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just free advice, right?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, no, this podcast is great. It's really helped me develop my practice as well. And your content has been great on social media. Can you plug? I know you don't like doing stuff like this, but can you plug your Twitter handle and stuff for the listeners, please?
Oh yeah, it's KPRASMD. So it's KPRASMD. Yeah, but it's I don't even know what's on there, but it's probably a bunch of venous stuff.
It's been pretty great.
Some weird injections.
Yeah, it's been pretty great as far as expanding the scope of what we can do with image guidance. You've posted a lot of things on ultrasound guided nerve injections and on vein disease. That's been very, very inspiring for people who want to get out into this. I think your content's great, man, and I wish you all the best in your practice. This has been a fantastic talk. Any parting words for the audience before we log off?
I would just say, like, I have no idea, how we built our practice. Like when I look back on it, because where we started to where we are today is just totally different. I think you should really just throw yourself out there and try things. As far as, all these weird injections and stuff like that, like that's the easy stuff if you're an IR, never feel like you can't do that stuff. Everyone can do that, and then all the things to get you to the point where you have a practice, like you can figure it out. That's the stuff we don't know how to do when we come out of training, but you'll figure it out just like everybody else did.
Yeah, that's great advice, man. Once again, I just want to say thanks. It's always good talking to you. Can't wait to, stay in touch even more. And I'm sure the listeners really appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Thanks, Shamit. Yeah. I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
For sure, man. Okay.
Yeah.
Take care.
You too, man.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars, and share with a friend. If you have any questions or comments, direct message us at _BackTable MSK on Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. BackTable is produced and hosted by myself, Jacob Fleming, and co-hosts
Michael Barraza
and Chris Beck.
Our audio team is led by Kieran Gannon, with support from
Josh McWhirter,
Aaron Bowles, Nick Shellcross,
and Ness Smith-Savadoff.
Design and digital marketing led by Brian Schmitz.
Social media and show notes written by Marvi Espiritu
and Ann Dang.
Administrative support provided by Junroy Kennebrew.
Thanks again, and see you next time.